So as promised, I'm going to talk through a little bit about the tools and the equipment that I've been using to make these tiny little Fussy-Cut foundation paper pieced economy blocks, and just explain really the process that I've been using that's helped me fall in love with this process. Before now, I have completely steered away from foundation paper piecing because it just looked too daunting and I really didn't know where to begin. So I thought I'll start with something small because I can do something small, surely. Something straightforward that's only got a few lines to sew along is doable. So I had a little hunt online for an economy block pattern. I found these printable ones on Etsy, and that's created by Mary at Mitten Designs. I'll put a link below so you can follow through. She has some patterns that have multiple sizes, and I thought, right, let's start with the smallest. I have this foundation paper piecing paper, which is really, really easy to stitch through. That goes into your printer, print off the pattern, and then you've got that on a page. Cut those patterns out and replaced them and photocopied it again, so I got more to a sheet, just to save a little bit of ink, save a little bit of paper and speed through the process. So once you're ready to start sewing, you'll need one of your little patterns. I always use a little ruler. This 4.5 inch one is fine for what I need. Then you'll need yourself a little fussy cutting template. This one is 1.5 inches and gives you a focal point of 1 inch to make the centre of your economy block. And then I cut 2 more squares of a contrasting fabric that are 1.5 inches, and then cut those into, so you've got 4 triangles. And then I cut 2 more squares at about 2 inches, sometimes a little fraction over, and then you've got plenty. Divide those into 2 triangles and they form the outer 4 portions of your little economy block. So once you've got all of that together, the next thing I like to do is with a stylus, or you could use a propelling pencil where the lead's retracted, I just score into this foundation paper piecing, and I found this really helpful because it perforates easily when you want to remove the paper at the end. But the other advantage is it extends the line that you're going to stitch along so that when you pop it under the machine, you can see where to drop your needle and it helps you line up nice and accurately. So I just fold the paper along that creased line before I start pinning my fabric in place, and then that's all nice and flexible and easy to sew, and you can see those lines extended there that you can follow when you pop it under the machine. So then you'll take your central piece for your economy block, and you're going to have the darker printed surface uppermost when you're sewing, so therefore you will want the fabric that you're going to be viewing at the centre of your finished piece is going to be wrong side to wrong side on that pattern piece. And then you want to hold it up to the light. I've been using a light box when I've done something a little bit more complicated now, but holding it up to a window is fine just to position that in the centre. Pop a pin, hold it in place, and then the next thing you need to do is take one of the triangles that will form the next layer out, and that is going to line up with this line here, and you want it to be above it by approximately 1/4 inch. So I sort of eyeball it and make sure the points of the triangle are overlapping the outside edge of the next layer evenly. And then if you flip it over and you hold it up to the light again, it's probably not the best to see it here, but I make sure then that that bit of fabric is extending beyond the line that I'm going to stitch. And then once I'm happy with it, repin it, take it to the machine, stitch along that line, and then repeat in rotation all the way round until you've got your 4 central pieces stitched in position. And then once those 4 are stitched in position, then you stitch the 4 outer portions in place. So what I'll do is, rather than explain it like this, I'm going to break down a little video now and show you that step by step as it goes. Okay, so now we're over at the machine. You want to be dropping your stitch length down, so it needs to be 1.5 or less. 1.5 has worked out fine for me so far, so I'm just sticking with that. And then you're going to take your foundation paper piecing to stitch those triangles in place around the central square. So you can see now where that line is really helpful to guide where you're going to drop the needle. And I stitch beyond just that square itself. So I start 1/4 of an inch ahead of it and about 1/4 of an inch after the end of that section of the square, and then take it, press it, and then do the next one. So I'll show you what that looks like now. Okay, here it is on the pressing mat. I managed not to film the stitching of this one, so I will try and film the next stage. It's a bit hard one-handed. So I press first just to make sure the threads are nice and tight, and then I will press with my iron to just hold that one back nicely. Looks like a nice little hat. Okay, and I'll show you the next view. So here you can see a little bit better where the triangle is extending about 1/4 of an inch above the line that you're going to stitch along. And there it is on the other side. I'll pin that in place and then stitch as I did with the other one. When you're over at your machine, you just want to queue up your needle with this line, and you've got your crease there so you can line that up more easily. And then drop your needle in place, stitch all the way down, stopping about 1/4 of an inch beyond it, and then repeat that 4 times and you'll get the central piece nicely framed by the next layer out with those 4 little triangles that you cut. You might notice as well that this central piece that I'd cut has swiveled a little bit, and it honestly will not matter if that moves a fraction, provided that it covers all of that square. So if it rotates and there's a little bit that isn't covering one of the points or one of the lines, then that won't get clipped in when you're stitching, but it can rotate and swivel so that you can position your motif how you want it to be displayed at the centre of your little economy block. Okay, so once you've dropped your foot, just eyeball your needle coming down, drop it in position, stitch along that line, and then snip off your thread, and then take that over to the machine and press, and there's your central part fussy cutted and looking very pretty. Okay, so over at the mat then, I always press it before I fold it back, and then press it again, turn it over just for good luck, repress it, and there you go. There's your first section done of your economy block, and then next up is the outer 4 pieces, which you'll position so that they extend beyond this new square that you've created by about 1/4 of an inch, and I'll show you how to do those now. So for the final 4 outer pieces, what I've noticed as I was working through is it's rather helpful that the apex of this right angle triangle, if you tuck it into the right angle that you've created by sewing the middle section in place, it usually but it's worth checking it. It usually works out that that positions the next piece perfectly so that it's beyond the line where you're going to stitch by about 1/4 of an inch. So it doesn't always work out that way, so it's worth checking it. Sometimes you end up having to pull it out a little bit. But I found that a really nice, quick and easy sort of speedy guide for myself. So I just tuck it in there, check it, pin it, and then sew in position. When I'm stitching the initial 4 pieces in position, I've got in the habit of stitching 1, 2, 3, 4 in rotation. But when I do the outer section of the economy block, I've got in a different habit of doing opposing pairs, just because I find that a little bit easier, that I can pin 2 at once and sew that side, then sew the other side, press those 2 pieces out and then do the same again for the next pair. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't rotate those as well. I like the finish that I get with doing it this way. So let me show you what that will look like. So here you go. We've got 2 of the 4 outer sections of the economy block in position now. And then you can do the same with the next 2 pieces, the opposing pairs, pin those in position and sew them. Just a little word of warning though, if you are going to pin both and sew both before you've turned one of them back, you might just want to check that you're not clipping that point in, because sometimes if you've cut these outer pieces a little bit larger, they could overlap and you don't want to do that. So just check as you go that you're not catching anything under the needle that you don't want to be sewn in position. So here you go, here's the mostly finished, untrimmed block, and that finishes at about 2.5 inches, but you're going to trim it down so that it will be 2.25 inches once you trim along this dotted line, and then that 1/4 inch seam allowance will mean that the very finished block that's sewn together with other blocks will be finishing at 2 inches. So there you go, that's a trimmed one that's down to 2.25. The freshly sewn off the machine is about 2.5, and then when they all get joined together, they reduce down to 2 inches as a finished block. So there we go. And then once you've succeeded in making one, you'll just want to make more and more and more, and you won't be able to stop because it is so addictive and so much fun. It's nice and quick. You can squeeze in making one of these around other things going on, so you feel like, yay, I've actually finished a project, because I'm classing one of those as a little project, and each one is a tiny little fabric pool, and each one is a joy to create and to make something beautiful, like this little frog. All the tiny notes just sing because they pop and they stand out. So I really hope that this makes you feel, as I did, less scared by the idea of foundation paper piecing, and it demystifies the whole which way round do I sew, what do I stitch on, which piece goes first, and all the aspects of it that made me want to just avoid it for probably about 3 years, because I presumed that it was something that was very, very technical, something I couldn't do. So I just didn't even go there and try. And now I've tried it, I'm more encouraged to have a go at some slightly more complex pieces, and I feel really excited because all those patterns I bought that have waited to be used, I can now enjoy having a play with. But meanwhile, I think I'm just going to keep exploring making the little economy blocks and see where they lead. So show me what you make. I would love to see what you end up making, and I hope this helps you feel more confident. Just have a little play, because at the end of the day, we learn a lot when we play.